Okay, now I've given the system some time to charge up. We're in the middle of the day. You can see the PV light here on the charge controller is blinking. The battery light has turned green to let us know the battery is actually all charged up. It was red originally when I hooked it on. So now that's charged up as well. Can check the power inverter here. Actually has some information on it. Get it to focus on it there. You can see that right now the battery's got about 13.4, 13.5 volts. You can also see right here it looks like the battery's mostly charged, but it's not all the way charged. So inverters sometimes are kind of handy because they can give you some extra information about the battery so you can monitor what's going on there. And so everything's all hooked up and ready to go, so all we need to do now is test the outlets and the switches. And so first thing to do is to go ahead and test the outlets. And so what I've done here is I've set up a fan hooked up to the 120 volt outlet, and then I've set up basically just a little air pump that I use for my raft to one of the 12 volt outlets just to check and make sure that those work. So kick that on, the fan powers up. Get a nice little breeze in here, which is pretty good because it's been hot lately. And then the fan. So that's working. So outlets are working. I'll go through and make sure, test every single one of them, make sure they're all working. But I have no doubt that they're all going to be working just fine. So the next thing that we got to do though is test the switches to make sure that the lights are working, the on-off switches, and the dimmer switches are working. So I'm going to go ahead and test those out now. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is go ahead and test all the switches and make sure that the lights are working properly. I don't have my other devices hooked up, like the air conditioning unit's going to be hooked up to this switch because it's a little small AC unit that uses a Peltier device and doesn't actually have any refrigerant. So I don't have that hooked up yet, so I can't test that, but I have no doubt if the lights are working properly that at least I've wired everything up right, and that switch should work once I do hook that up. So first thing we'll check here is the on-off switches. So I've got these three lights here connected to this on-off switch, and go ahead and flip that, and as you can see, these lights are powering up nice and bright. This on-off switch is for the outside lights. I don't have anything hooked up there yet, so can't test that. This light here is for the bathroom, which seems to work just fine. And then over here, got the dimmer switches. This is probably the one thing that would be worried about not working, but these also seem to work just fine. If you kind of pay attention to the light there, see when you kick it on, it's hard to see, but it's really dim, and it is lit up, and as I gradually turn it up, the light does get brighter and brighter. It does kind of have a point where it just kind of flicks on to full brightness, but the dimmer switches do seem to work. Now that flick on is not something that's different here. That did happen when I originally tested the potentiometers, so it's not a wiring issue or anything. That's just kind of the way that the potentiometers work with the LEDs. Really the best way to control an LED for dimming is with PWM, pulse width modulation, but those devices are pretty expensive and they're kind of large, so they don't really fit inside an electrical box here. So I just went ahead with the potentiometers, and I can deal with that little flicker over because it's not a big deal, at least to me. So and then when I go ahead and test out the other one here, you can see it lights up, and then as I crank it up, it gets brighter and brighter. And there we go. So it seems that everything is working. All the switches are working, the outlets are working, system's all powered up, and good to go. So if you do have any problems, if something's not working, power down the system, open up your kill switches so that you don't have to worry about shocking yourself or damaging any equipment, and then maybe retrace your lines. Usually if that's a problem, it has to do with a line trace, or make sure that you didn't puncture or break any of the lines while you were, say, attaching them to the siding. So otherwise, congratulations.